Hello everybody and welcome to this video where I continue my series on Romeo and Juliet. If you find this video useful, please do remember to give it a thumbs up. It really does help. Okay, we're in Act 2, Scene 3, in Friar Lawrence's cell. Now, Friar Lawrence is a Catholic priest in the play, as all of the characters are Catholics in Romeo and Juliet. Friar Lawrence walks in with a basket in his hand. And he says, the grey-eyed morn smiles on the frowning night, checkering the eastern clouds with streaks of light, and flecked darkness like a drunkard reels from forth day's path and Titan's fiery wheels. So he's basically saying that the morning is arriving to replace the night, and the dark is becoming sort of streaked with little rays of sunlight, and darkness is going away. And from the sunlight, he says, now ere the sun advance his burning eye, the day to cheer and night's dank dew to dry, I must upfill this osier cage of ours with baleful weeds and precious juiced flowers. So he's basically saying before the sun rises fully and dries up the dew off the flowers and everything, kind of becomes hot, I've got to fill up this basket with poisonous weeds and medicinal flowers. So he's collecting sort of plants with two purposes, as it were. The earth that nature's mother is her tomb, what is her burying grave, that is her womb. So he's saying the earth, where nature lives and resides, lives and dies, both buries and gives birth to her. So he's talking here about the dual nature of things, which becomes very important later in the play, and indeed is a theme in this whole play. And you'll see more about that in more detail in my ebook. It's £1.99. Please do follow the link in the description and pick up a copy as an instant download. So, what happens next then as the friar is talking? Quite a long speech from Friar Lawrence here. And what he is talking about foreshadows what will come later in the play. We don't know that at the moment necessarily, but some of the things he's saying now are important for the audience to understand so that the acts later in the play will make sense. And from her womb children of diverse kind we sucking on her natural bosom find, many for many virtues excellent, none but for some and yet all different. So he's basically saying from the supply of nature we find lots of nourishment, we find lots of things that have very good purposes and some that have very bad purposes. Oh, mickle is the powerful grace that lies in herbs, plants, stones, and their true qualities, for naught so vile that on the earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. So he's basically saying there's a great power in plants and in herbs, because there's nothing alive on earth that cannot be used for good, and also used for bad. So he's basically talking about plants and saying plants can be used for good purposes, but also can be used for bad purposes. So here we have then, more talk of the good and bad nature of things. In herbs, plants, stones, and their true qualities, for naught so vile that on the earth doth live, and that's the bit I've just read, isn't it? No, nor aught so good but strange from that fair use, revolts from true birth, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice sometimes by action dignified. So he's saying there's nothing alive on the earth that cannot be used for good, but on the flip side of that, there's nothing on earth that isn't made for good that can also be misused and used for bad. So he's sort of saying good things turn bad and bad things turn good. And then he gives an example of a plant, and he says, within the infant rind of this small flower, poison hath residence and medicine power. So he's saying this tiny flower here has poison in it, but also powerful medicine. For this being smelt, this is quite an interesting line, I think. For this being smelt, what cheers each part, being tasted slays all senses with the heart. So he's saying if you sniff this flower, it will lift you and have a positive effect on you. But if you eat it, you'll die. It's poisonous to eat. Two such supposed kings encamp them still, in man as well as herbs, grace and rude will, and where the worser is predominant, full soon the canker death eats up that plant. Now, he's saying then two opposing forces of good and bad live together, not just in plants but also in humans. And where the evil is the strongest, death will win. And with that, Romeo walks in. And it's something to consider that during the play, can Romeo and Juliet be seen as, one of them good, one of them bad, and which one sort of wins out? Is this a metaphor for them that the friar is talking about? So Romeo says, "Good morrow, father." So, good morning, father. And Friar Lawrence says, "Benedict, God bless you. What early tongue so sweet saluteth me? Young son, it argues a distempered head, so soon to bid good morrow to thy bed. Care keeps his watch in every old man's eye, and where care lodges, sleep will never lie." So he's saying, who is this who's saying good morning to me? And then he's saying, you know what, it's a bad sign that you're up so early. So we get the sense that maybe it's 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or something. He's saying a lot of old men, or in fact all old men, have troubles and problems, and therefore they cannot sleep much. But where unbruised youth with unstuffed brain, nice little phrase, isn't it? Unstuffed brain, doth couch his limbs, there golden sleep doth reign. So he's saying old people have a lot to stress about and so don't sleep very well. But young people, as soon as they go to bed, they sleep really deeply and peacefully. Therefore thy earliness doth me assure thou art uproused by some distemperature, or if not so, then here I hit it right, our Romeo hath not been in bed tonight. So he's saying, so the fact that you're up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, it kind of tells me that you've got some sort of problem that's kept you up all night stressed. Or, if that's not the case, then how about this for an idea? You haven't even gone to bed. And Romeo says, "That last is true, the sweeter rest was mine." So he's saying, yep, you're right, I haven't been to bed, although I still had a beautiful, sweet rest. And here we see the friar then guess at what's going on, but he gets it wrong. He says, "God pardon sin, wast thou with Rosaline?" So in other words, God forgive you, have you spent the night with Rosaline? And Romeo says, with Rosaline, my ghostly father? No, I forgot that name, and that name's Woe. So he's kind of like, no, of course I wasn't with Rosaline. I've forgotten all about her. The friar says, "That's my good son, but where hast thou been then?" So in other words, well, that's great. I'm glad you've forgotten Rosaline. So it's clear that the friar knows Romeo, knows about Rosaline, and is happy to think he's moved on from her. But then where have you been? Romeo gets a little bit impatient and says, "I'll tell thee, ere thou ask it me again. I have been feasting with mine enemy, whereon a sudden one hath wounded me. That's by me wounded, both are remedies, within thy help and holy physic lies. I bear no hatred, blessed man, for though my intercession likewise stays my foe." So Romeo's saying, I'll tell you before you ask me again. I've been at a party eating with my enemies, the Capulets, and one of them wounded me and I wounded them. And only you can heal us both, because it's not hate that I have for these people anymore, blessed man, and my request will help my enemy too. So he's kind of talking in riddles. And the friar, in what is quite a funny moment, says, "Be plain, good son, and homely in thy drift. Riddling confession finds but riddling shrift." In other words, just stop talking rubbish and quickly tell me what's going on. Speaking in riddles doesn't do anyone any good. Romeo says, "Then plainly know my heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet. As mine and hers, so hers is set on mine, and all combined, save what thou must combine." So he's saying, well, I'll tell you the truth then. I'm in love with Juliet, the daughter of Lord Capulet. I love her, and she loves me, and our love saves us. And then he wants the friar to do something. He says, "By holy marriage, when and where and how we met, we wooed, and made exchange of vow. I'll tell thee as we pass, but this I pray, that thou consent to marry us today." So basically what he's saying is, we met, we flirted, we fell in love. I'm going to tell you all about that in a bit, but please, before we go any further, will you promise me that you will marry the two of us together today? Well, Friar Lawrence reacts like the rest of us probably react, and says, "Holy St. Francis, what a change is here! Is Rosaline, whom thou didst love so dear, so soon forsaken? Young men's love then lies not truly in their hearts, but in their eyes. Jesu Maria, what a deal of brine hath washed thy sallow cheeks for Rosaline! How much salt water thrown away in waste to season love that of it doth not taste! The sun not yet thy sighs from heaven clears, thy old groans ring yet in my ancient ears. So this is summarising a bit of the backstory between the friar and Romeo and their relationship and what he knows of Romeo. So he basically says, you've changed here. Rosaline is now forgotten, but you loved her so much. It's clear then that men love based on their eyes and what they see, but not based on their hearts. He's saying, how many tears did you cry for Rosaline? Your cheeks are still wet with the sort of trails of the tears that you cried over Rosaline. And all of that groaning and moaning about her is still ringing in my ears. I can still remember, exactly what you said about how in love you were with her. Though, lo, here upon thy cheek the stain doth sit of an old tear that is not washed off yet. If ever thou wast thyself, and these woes thine, thou and these woes were all for Rosaline. And art thou changed? Pronounce this sentence then. Women may fall when there's no strength in men. So, yep, he's saying, you have still got tear stains on your face from where you were crying for Rosaline, yet you say you've forgotten her. If this is true, then you must repeat this, that women can't be expected to be faithful to men or trust men when men are so weak. And that, I think, is quite an interesting line that backs up the sort of line of argument, or one of the lines of argument that I've been making through this series so far, that Romeo is a fickle character who, ultimately is weak compared to Juliet. There's a bit of Spice Girls girl power in this play, and you'll find more details and analysis on that in my ebook. Please do pick it up. It really does help. The link is in the description for the Kindle version or the PDF. Romeo says, thou chidest me off for loving Rosaline. So in other words, you were always telling me off when I was in love with Rosaline. And Friar Lawrence says, for doting, not for loving, pupil mine. So he calls Romeo out here and says, actually, you didn't love her. You were just obsessed with her. And Romeo says, and badest me bury love. So, you told me to kill off my love, to bury it, to put it in the grave. And Lawrence says, not in a grave to lay one in, another out to have. In other words, I wanted you to kill off your love for Rosaline, but not just to replace her with someone else. Romeo says, I pray thee, chide not. She whom I love now, doth grace for grace and love for love allow. The other did not so. And Romeo is basically saying, I beg you, please don't tell me off. The one I love now, she loves me. Rosaline didn't love me, but Juliet does love me. Friar Lawrence says, oh, she knew well, so he's talking about Rosaline. She, Rosaline, knew well, thy love did read by rote and could not spell. But come, young waverer, come, go with me, in one respect I'll thy assistant be, for this alliance may be so happy proved to turn your household's rancour to pure love. So he's basically saying something very important about Romeo here, if you're writing a character analysis of Romeo. And he's saying, Rosaline knew very well that your love wasn't real. You were speaking the words that you thought you should say, but it wasn't true love. But come with me, I am going to help you. This marriage might be a good thing, to turn the two enemy families, Capulet and Montague, to friendship. Romeo says, oh, let us hence, I stand on sudden haste, so hurry up then, I need to rush. And Friar Lawrence says, wisely and slowly they stumble that run fast, so slow down. Those who run fast, are sure to trip up. And that line at the end is very interesting because he's saying, we should slow down. If you rush things, they often go wrong. And yet Friar Lawrence is here, arranging and agreeing to marry Romeo to Juliet. And we see all throughout this play people rushing things. Capulet will rush the marriage and bring forward the marriage of Paris and Juliet. Romeo rushes into marrying Juliet. And Juliet, of course, in Act 1, Scene 5, said to Romeo, or in Act 2, Scene 1, said to Romeo, let's slow this down and let it grow naturally. This is too rushed. But Romeo is having none of it. He's, impatient and wants to get the marriage going. So that's it for this scene, and please do subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, next one tomorrow.